because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we go back to the FAC and the Hacienda and the Manchester scene to discuss 24-Hour Party People.
June the 4th, the Sex Pistols play Manchester for the very first time. There are only 42 people in the audience. Inspired, they will go out and perform wondrous deeds. For instance, behind me are Stiff Kittens, later to become Joy Division, finally to become New Order. That's John the Postman. He's a postman.
And welcoming back to the show, we have Mattia Acetoso. Mattia is a professor of Italian studies at Boston College. And you heard him here before discussing two amazing directors' first films, which both came out in 1996, Wes Anderson's Bottle Rocket and Paul Thomas Anderson's Hard Eight. Welcome back to Cows in the Field, Mattia.
Thank you very much. Hello.
And well, Mattia, I should have also mentioned that, we're old friends from grad school. And, in the event that people didn't listen to the Bottle Rocket and Hard Eight episode, but people should, because that was a good time. And those are two super fun movies that came out in the same year. It's like it's one of these surprising things that happen, where these two, sort of phenomenal directors had their first breakout films, and both films are really good. But anyway, we're talking today about 24-Hour Party People, and Mattia, I want to start with you with this question, because when we were talking about, having you back on the podcast, and I think you mentioned 24-Hour Party People, and I know this is a movie that's dear to your heart. So tell us about your relationship to the film.
First of all, I'm very happy to be back. I have very fond memories of our first conversation. And I think there was a lot of conversation about music even that time. There was not much music in either of the films we discussed. But my connection to this film is very personal. Partly there's an element of nostalgia, and I want to go back to the idea of nostalgia later on because there's a profound connection to English music and nostalgia. But the fact that I come from an area of Italy which is very into music, especially English music. And everyone is really well versed in the music scene of the 80s, 90s, post-punk. And this movie was recommended to me by a dear friend who was the first friend of mine who actually spent time abroad, spent time in England, and told me, Mattia, you have to watch this because it's a great film. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it just talks about the bands that we loved. And I think I watched him with him for the first time. I cannot recall exactly when I watched it for the first time. I can tell you, though, that I bought the DVD at Cutler's. Remember in New Haven? I found the DVD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was this tiny, very funky, old school record shop. There was was the Newbury District in New Haven. Was near Urban Art Theaters. It was very, the nice selection of DVDs. I remember watching it again. And so I like watching it. I like rewatching it. I am a huge Steve Coogan fan. And I'm a big fan of those bands. So in a sense, for me, just as a way to reconnect to both my music taste and to my friends in my own town. So that's why it's a personal film in a sense for me.
That's great. I mean, so when you were rewatching it for the podcast, had it been a while since you had seen it, or what? Is this like you watch every year type of movie?
No, it's like I watched probably last time was 2007.
Okay, wow.
I don't remember the first time.
Yeah,
so the first time I watch clips occasionally. Probably I don't know. I have this terrible habit of, especially late at night, I go down the YouTube rabbit hole and I bumped into and I got obsessed and I watched scenes, especially the scenes that my favorite scene. But let's say this time I had more of, we were supposed to have a conversation. I was more of a clinical view.
Oh, good.
And
okay.
And there's much more, something I appreciated more stylistically, formally, and something that made me feel very picky and why is this missing? Why is this not talking about this? Why is this inaccurate? And then why don't I know what happens next? So it was a very I would say emotional third view, let's say, or nth view, but also very what is this going on? So maybe we can go into some of this.
Okay, so let's start with the music then. Why not, right? Because I think what is one thing that's strange about the film that's charming as well, I think, is that the film is simultaneously a concert film, a sort of biopic, and a kind of meta farcical comedy. It's sort of all of these things at once, and in that it has that kind of distinctive, it's really become Michael Winterbottom's calling card, I think, in a way, where it's this weird blend of fact and fiction, where you're encouraged to watch the film as if what it's depicting was the real events, but at the same time, it gives you a lot of distance. It's constantly distancing you from those events, either in, with the character of Tony Wilson, played by Steve Coogan, like directly addressing the camera, which he does at several points.
Yep.
Even commenting that these events didn't happen. Characters say these events actually didn't happen.
Yeah.
And, he has this quote which he attributes to John Ford. What is the quote, Laura?
Okay, so here it is. So this is the scene in the factory bathrooms when Lindsay, his wife, is having sex with a member of the Buzzcocks. And the actual musician is there, and like they pan over to him, and he said, I think actually Wilson's Tony Coogan / Wilson says, "This is the real guy," and he says this didn't happen. And he said, so Tony quotes, he says, "But I quote John Ford when I say, when you have to choose between the truth and the legend, print the legend." Although the actual quote from the man who shot Liberty Valance is, "When legend becomes fact, print the legend." So it's like a little bit, he often kind of misquotes by a little bit in this movie, but in this one, I think it is interesting when he says, his version is, when you have to choose between truth and legend, go with legend. And Ford's is, once that legend has become fact, then, they print the legend. I feel like
subtly
his version
different.
Is that he's like, he's suggesting there's like more of an active, conscious myth making in Wilson's world.
Yeah. So anyway, I say all this just to comment on what you were saying, Mattia. But so, but
if I comment on this, what's kind of like off-putting about the movie is that stylistically it has this pretense of being a docufiction. Like, in fact, it also includes like original like videos from, so all the concerts you see, like Sex Pistols, Six and the Benches, you see the footage you see is the actual band. The crowd, it's the actors like playing, and then so in a sense it proposes like, okay, this is real, but then you have this like narrator that oftentimes breaks the fourth wall, which is something I love in movies to an extent. I think of Alfie, I don't know, something like that. It's very British to me. It's very unreliable because it clearly, like Laura's quote is perfect. It's like you understand that he's creating a myth, so it's a mythographer more than anything else, and that's what makes it compelling. Like, in a sense, you're like, what is he trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what's so makes it much more than the sum of its parts. Like, each of the individual things, concert film, you're like, that's fine. I kind of know how that goes. Biopic, know how that goes. Those are very straightforward. Put them together and you kind of think, concert film, biopic. We've seen that before. There's been plenty of those. No, actually, this is still nonetheless remarkably different. And it's not just different in that it plays fast and loose with the facts, but that it has this kind of shaggy, self-deprecating quality. And I think so much of that is due to Steve Coogan and his performance as Tony Wilson. But I said we were going to start with the music. So let's start with the music. We'll come around to Tony Wilson and we can ask the question, is this a film about the music or is this a film about Tony Wilson? But let's start with the music. So I know a lot of these bands are really important to you, Mattia. So you mentioned before we started recording that as a lover of this scene and the music, that there were a number of bands that were kind of written out of the narrative in this film. I mean, talk about that, because I don't know very much about the scene, so I was happy to take on board whatever the film was telling me. Probably that was my fault because maybe a lot of it was, fabricated. But what was left out?
Well, some of the other bands, they're mentioned. Some bands that Tony Wilson produced were mentioned, like the Certain Ratio, the Ritty Column. They mentioned The Fall. It was another band, post-punk band that was pretty popular and actually sedimented the sound of Manchester sound. But two, one, the Stone Roses, another Manchester band that sort of like probably took the torch of Happy Mondays and popularized it, embodying that sort of like auto-produced, self-producing, but also the Smiths. They're missing, like, towards the end, like you can see Steve Coogan just sold, or like, gave up the Hacienda and the factory record, and is smoking a joint with Sean and Rob from the label, and then God appears, and of course God looks like Steve Coogan.
Of course.
And said,
Tony, you did a good job. Basically, you were right. Sean is the greatest poet since Yeats.
This is amazing. Can I have it in writing?
It is already written in the sinews of history and the hearts of men. It's a pity you didn't sign the Smiths, but you were right about Mick Hucknall. His music's rubbish and he's a ginger.
So the first time I watched the movie, I was like, so cool. 25 Party People, Joy Division. And then you do the math, and it's like, why is the Smiths missing? It's one of the most important British bands that connected, the Beatles to whatever happens later. So it's like, why it's missing? Also, and then that's one of the clinical aspects that kind of like, this film is missing, is the fact that Tony Wilson was very close to Stephen Morrissey. Like, he saw him growing up as an artist, and I didn't know. So, for example, in this film, he comes back to the concert in 1976 that he saw at the with Sex Pistols. He saw the Lesser Free Trade Hall in June 1976. It was a moment with that small crowd that was an epiphany. But like, I saw an interview with Tony Wilson saying that he had an epiphany that year, and that's when he started bringing bands into his program at Granada Television. But it was first listening to Horses, the Patti Smith album in 76. Second, seeing Sex Pistols, but also 3, receiving a letter after the first time he showed Sex Pistols on As It Goes, the Granada Television, from a young 14-year-old kid that sent him like the sleeve of a record, empty sleeve of the record of the New York Dolls, with the letter saying, Dr. Wilson, please include bands like this in your program in the future. Thank you very much. Signed, Stephen Morrissey, 14 years old. And he was like, oh my gosh, this guy. And then he wanted to meet this guy, like Morrissey. At the time, he was just a poet, a writer. I said, this is going to be like the greatest writer we have. And it started a relationship. And odd enough, like, he followed his career, growing up, forming a band with Johnny Marr, and never produced him. Like, and there are so many conflicting reports about why he didn't. And even in an interview where he explains why he didn't sign him, is not clear about why he didn't sign him. Right. I think there was a disagreement with Rob Gretton, the partner with King. What's his name? The actor that plays Rob Gretton is like
Paddy Considine.
What's his name? The king in the House of Dragons.
Yeah,
it's him.
Okay, yeah, I see. Paddy Considine.
He's a Targaryen, so it was getting ready to become big. To mess up. And so in a sense, like they said, Rob was going around Manchester saying the Smiths are the new Beatles, but yet they didn't sign them, and the Smiths sort of signed with Rough Trade and moved to London. And I think it's also because that's a different kind of sound. So going back, this is where probably reality and fiction, 24 Hour People fiction, merge. I sense Tony Wilson also wanted to be always in charge of his own narrative, like you see in the film. So in a sense, the Smiths didn't fit because they didn't fit with the kind of sound that he had in mind of rock mixed with dance. So probably that's why, in a sense, I didn't sign.
I think that's exactly right, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I had read was that Morrissey sort of refused to be a part of it because of her sort of like ongoing disputes with him and Tony Wilson. And so I'm sure they were like close, and they also have their issues. And like, I think there was going to be a scene where Morrissey makes out with Lindsay, and like an actor playing Morrissey, and Morrissey's like, absolutely not. So it like Tony Wilson is still like in the center of all of this, even as they are making the movie, because like in order to have the musicians on board, in order to play their music, and in order to like have their blessing, they're all kind of like, this is all going through the relationships with Tony Wilson, and they all have very mixed feelings about Tony Wilson, is what I'm getting from what I've read.
I think it's also that, this is ultimately Tony Wilson's
his movie.
Story. You know, and I think at the end of the day, you're right, Mattia. You mentioned Control, which is a biopic focused on Joy Division and Ian Curtis. This is definitely not a Joy Division movie. You know, this is not a New Order movie. And this is not really a movie about the Manchester scene. I mean, it is, but it's incidentally about that. I think it's ultimately a movie about Tony Wilson telling his version of the events as he would want it to be told, or at least as some incarnation or avatar of him would want it to be told.
Right. And the Smiths wouldn't be his success story.
No.
So it's not, you're right, it's not in there.
And so I think that's exactly to your point.
Exactly what Mattia said, yeah.
On the Tony Wilson of it all, I think he's such an interesting character because he's simultaneously, I think this is a weird mixture of traits that he has. He's simultaneously an iconoclastic punk, right? He doesn't sign contracts with his artists. I mean, whatever contract he signed was in blood, but it basically just said, we don't own anything. He loses money constantly.
It's a terrible business.
He takes himself to be, the highest honor to be never having sold out. And yet he's sort of obsessed with how he will be perceived in posterity. He's constantly comparing what's happening in Manchester in 1980 or whatever to other famous, super famous events in human history, like the Last Supper or the first manned airplane trip or the building of the first canals in, or Archimedes discovering, what was he discovering in the bathtub? Oh, he's discovering that water just mass or whatever. And, it's and he's unironically comparing himself to these people. And then when, in the end of the movie, when God shows up and he's like, I just saw God. He looked like me. That's what a line. Because it's how he sees himself. He sees himself as this sort of Messiah figure or really, no, not Messiah. He sees himself as Moses, right? Moses is the one who he's the one who delivers the word of God to the masses, right? He's on he comes and brings it down. And I think he sees himself in that sort of same vein. And anyway, I think he's just a fascinating character. And I think in some ways it's a role Steve Coogan was born to play because he softens all of that self-aggrandizement and he can do it so well.
Excellent, well done. Very good, very good.
So where is everyone?
Yeah.
We had 100 on the guest list.
You at the Sex Pistols gig, how many people were in the audience?
It was about 40.
Right, and it was history?
Yeah, but there's only 30 here tonight.
Exactly. The smaller the attendance, the bigger the history. There were 12 people at the Last Supper, half a dozen at Kitty Hawk. Archimedes was on his own in the bath.
It's also pretty usually Steve Coogan is another actor bigger than life in a sense, in other films, but it's very contained. I think he delivers very well the character of Tony Wilson. Tony Wilson was very literate, was very well educated.
Oh yeah,
so in a sense, it's part of that myth making, the sort of quoting, misquoting, to create the narrative they want about. Because I think that sometimes you just keep telling there's an epic element where you just you create your own narrative to create the myth. So mostly creates the myth, even describing himself as a genius, because of course he was not an economic genius, had no discernible talent, creative talent, but he was very good at selecting the right people. In fact, all of his decisions were kind of terrible, economic decisions towards the end, sending Happy Mondays to record. That was at Barbados.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he was a genius at creating cool vibes.
Yeah, I
right?
think that's right.
Even the thing where he's losing money on the New Order album, it's because it looks so fucking cool. He's good at making it look cool, making it feel cool, and but he's not making any money off of it.
It's the thing where he's looking to the future. He's not not thinking like a record executive who's thinking about the third quarter sales of this year. He's thinking about posterity. He wants to have created something that will last, and he succeeded. I mean, that's the to be in his defense, he succeeded at he succeeded really to an incredible degree at the very thing he wanted to do. And I think, they made a freaking movie about him. And not only that, many of the songs in the movie you will have heard. And they did, the Michael Winterbottom, the director of the film, he's so good at peppering that in, he'll be like, oh yeah, this band that you've heard of, and then playing some Sex Pistols, concert where they're playing I'm the Antichrist or whatever, where you're like immediately like, yeah, I know that one. Or like there's just New Order in the background playing Blue Monday or whatever. And everybody you're just immediately like, oh yeah, I know that song. Like, and it's just like, yes, Tony Wilson succeeded. These songs have become part of the DNA of popular music.
In a sense, we never talk about the producer or the person who discovered them or made the scene possible.
Right.
You need these kind of people that kind of enabler. And I think that there's a kind of negative connotation, but it sort of enables this band to thrive. And because you also need a scene, you also like venues, like he created Factory Night to allow the bands from Factory Records to play live, and the same happened with Hacienda. So in a sense, like that was his talent,
and he didn't
want to undermine his qualities. But
of course, no, and he totally talented, and because he was good at what he needed to do. I mean, the other thing is he was a promoter. He has a TV show, and he saw talent and he put it on the air and he brought it to the masses. So, I mean, he had a platform, and, what he would be now is an influencer, right? Like that's what he basically would be today. He would be on TikTok and he'd have 10 million followers on TikTok. Like that's the kind, that thing is now, he wouldn't really be like a record producer.
No, he's like the anti-Scooter Braun.
Exactly. Yeah. He's not a really producer. He's just a guy who popularized. He sees something cool and he's like, I think I want other people to see this and share in this. And that is a real talent. I think it's hard to see so clearly the future,
I like what you say about the future, but it's also something that if you think about it, and we can talk about it later, it was at a certain point in music history, it was lost. And that's when I'm talking about nostalgia. At a certain point in time, let's say around 2001, 2004, like music stopped sounding, looking to the future, but started sounding like, which is the thesis of, I've left the book here. This guy, Simon Reynolds, is an English like music critic that after the Strokes, it started like bands started looking back. And then even now, if you think about it, like very few, you have this sort of sense of like craving for a different future. Like, what is the sound of the future? Now we're more like, we want to make this sound like this band, the other band. So, and I think in that sense, it's true. Like Tony Wilson was a visionary because it was looking forward. So
no, that's really interesting. Actually, can we dwell on this point? Because I think it's happening like quite significantly in popular film right now and television too. Everything is backwards looking, nostalgia driven, and there are, I mean, of course there's lots of good stuff too, but like it's very hard right in this moment to kind of see through. But a good way to tell is to just, drawing on the book you just mentioned, Mattia, is to just sort of set aside all the nostalgia stuff and then think about the stuff which is not driven by nostalgia, that's actually trying to push forward. And much of it is maybe not succeeding in these terms now, but it very well could succeed in 10, 20, 30 years because it's ahead of its time in this way. And I do think that, like, I don't know, because I don't listen to enough like contemporary popular music to like be in the scene. This is when Mattia and I met each other, I was much more immersed in like a music scene, but I am not anymore, so I can't speak to that. But I do think in the case of films, like, it is unfortunately also very backward looking. So
you mentioned like we talked about music first time we met. I can send you all the pictures you want, Laura. Privately, I send you pictures.
Privately,
I sent you some
on the Cows in the Field website. Whatever.
But I remember, like, we went to see like one of the concerts we went together was the Acetoso for the Painfully Alone.
Oh yeah, we went to Acetoso. It was at like a it was in. I mean, do you remember this concert, right? Yeah, it was like
social center.
Yeah, social center. Yeah, it had like fluorescent lights, and they didn't turn the lights off. So there's a concert with standing only, because it wasn't even that full, but it wasn't even that big.
Like a community, like a
community center.
Okay.
Was it in House Street? Like House Street towards
on House Street, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
It was like not a concert venue, and they just stood up there, and one of them was playing. Yeah. Oh, actually, that was the opening band. But Cassioton was the opening band. Actually made an impression on me too. Actually, because one of them had like a hand-driven organ. But no, they didn't even turn the lights off. I mean, what a strange concert. And we would go see concerts like this all the time. And there's a lot of concerts in New Haven, in Davis, where I went to school, where there used to be free concerts all the time. And I was just like, I'll just go to this free concert, and who knows? And then it turns out to be like an amazing band that you later are like,
You hear on the radio 6
or,
years later.
whatever, or you just end up listening to a lot. You
Yeah.
know? So anyway, yes, but this is not the world I live in now.
But yeah, I think that there was this kind of the hiatus around 2000, 2001. So the book that I was talking about is called Retromania. It's by Simon Reidel. It's this music journalist, I guess. So yeah, that something was lost at a certain point, like that bands started like to look backward, which is nothing wrong in a sense. Like that's how sort of what happened with Steve Cook and Sex Pistols. Like you have the avant-garde. That was the avant-garde. You break with the past, and then you build something new by reconciling the past and the new. At a certain point, this process broke. Like I like when Steve Cook and Tony Wilson explains how movement go up and down.
Yeah.
One movement goes down, one goes up. And he said, "Happy Monday are here." Like what was going down was the previous edition, and then it was going up something new. Now at the moment, I think that will be a flat line, or like something goes backwards. What are we going to recover? The Strokes were looking back. Remember the Strokes, Vines, looking back to like the garage band, like Iggy Pop, or like that kind of scene. And then you had like Interpol looking back at Joy Division, and it was like early 2000 kind of like music scene. And then we never like moved away from that trend of recycling sounds, sort of like relying on nostalgia as a feeling that kind of feeds our music industry because it's profitable. Like in the sense, like and especially with it's something that it sells, and then if it sells, like music industry tends to promote that. This sort of excludes the indie rock scene in a sense. Like there's still like independent bands and stuff, especially thanks to streaming, online, cheaper cost of producing music. It's fine, but the general trend is like not looking to the future, but looking back, like to make the present more palatable in a sense.
We need a Tony Wilson. I guess that's the lesson, right? We need a Tony Wilson to come in and shake up pop music.
I have a little anecdote.
Also, the streaming services. Sorry, Laura, I didn't interrupt. As the streaming services they're not helping. Like sometimes you have Spotify, and it could be like, wow, I can listen to so many new records, and end up listening to the same old records that I listened 10 years ago. So in a sense, like nostalgia wins. So yes, it's true. We need the visionary that helps us look with faith to the future.
Yes,
music future.
Yeah. I have a little like anecdote about Tony Wilson because he was there on set a lot.
Okay.
And so I read this article that was written by a journalist who went and visited set, and he did several interviews with Tony Wilson, and Wilson would just like leave him voicemails and stuff afterwards. Because I think the biggest thing that Wilson seemed concerned about with this movie was not that he was going to that they were going to take the piss out of him, because he knew they were. And he was like, I'm at peace with it. That's cool. That's fine with me. Like, that's a good story, But what he was most worried about, he was like, when there's a movie about you, then like, it's like your story's done. And he's like, I'm not done. I'm making Factory 3. I've got other things going on. Like, he's like, I am not, like, I do not want, people to put a period at the end of my sentence now. Like he's still always in 2001. He's like,
pushing.
I'm looking forward always.
That's also fun is that they made this film celebrating that moment of his life when he was still alive. Like, I mean, he died in 2007. I don't think he was sick at the time. He didn't know. So that's bizarre to me that you do like your own biopic. And
I know.
Yeah, well, that's what I find so interesting about this movie is that I feel like it's so it's in 2001 and in 1976 through 1985, whatever that span is, at the same time constantly, because we have this, breaking of the fourth wall, because we have this constant references to postmodernism, and because we're having all of the musicians show up and do cameos in this movie, sometimes explicitly so and sometimes more hidden, which I later found out because I am not knowledgeable enough to recognize when they're there, but they're there. And so they're like on set meeting the actors who are playing them. All the actors got to meet their counterparts. The musicians are all there. When they have the Hacienda last night thing, what they did is they recreated the Hacienda and they just ran it like a club for 3 nights to get the footage. And New Order came and DJ'd.
That's cool.
So like they're all there and they're all sort of like seeing their own stories be interpreted, and they're all reacting in real time to their stories being interpreted, such that like the Buzzcocks guy's like, you need to say that this didn't happen, and then he's in the scene. Yeah. So there's like this dialogue constantly in the movie, and it's in the fabric of the movie between 2001 and the past.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the movie is kind of, whereas they're looking forward to the 2001 when the film is being made, which are simultaneously looking back, because ultimately this is a navel-gazing film.
Right.
And, so,
and we're kind of in this loop with it.
Yeah, that's cool. I think there's also a quote in the film that I think sort of summarizes maybe if there's anything that is trying to, every quote that Tony Wilson throws out is in a way an encapsulation of his own view of the world. But the Boethius quote, which is quite interesting. Actually, apparently the character who says the quote, who's a homeless man, and Tony Wilson also says the quote at one point, but is credited as Boethius. Yeah. So Boethius as homeless man.
There you go. Keep that.
So, mate, I'm Boethius, author of The Consolation of Philosophy. It's my belief that history is a wheel. Inconstancy is my very essence, says the wheel. Rise up on my spokes if you like, but don't complain when you cast back down into the depths. Good times pass away, but then so do the bad. Mutability is our tragedy, but it's also our hope. The worst of times, like the best, are always passing away.
I know.
What I think is interesting about this quote is that it does summarize the kind of Stoic philosophy that Boethius was interested in, which is in part an attempt to sort of reconcile yourself to the fact that because things are constantly changing, it's sort of fruitless to try to hold on to anything. But at the same time, I think what Tony Wilson is doing is trying to square that circle. The circle being the wheel, right? Because what he's doing is he's constantly looking forward. He's constantly moving. He's like a shark, right? He's riding the wheel. But at the same time, he's riding the wheel with one mind looking backwards at himself from the future, riding the wheel and being like, I can hold on to that. Because it's once the wheel's turned, the fact that it's turned that way will always be the case. So I will always have been the guy who found Joy Division or whatever. And I've always been the guy who started the Hacienda or whatever. And so that is like a way of attempting to kind of hold on to the mutability while you're in the moment of the ups and downs of everything. It's right. So take that external perspective, which is what he's always doing with this posterity thing. He's always like looking to the future in order to, like, as you said, Laura, look back from that vantage point of the future when everything's fixed and you can hold on to it and it can be unmutable, immutable. And anyway, I think you can see a lot of the tension in Tony Wilson's character, I think, through that, right? Through that kind of coming to terms with, I think, what he sees as the truth that, you know, life is a wheel and it's inconstant. So anyway, I like that. I like that a lot. I think a lot of the quotes are very revelatory of Tony Wilson as a character. Icarus. If you haven't heard of him, maybe you should read more. Or somebody.
Yeah, he was like that in real life. He was very, very well versed in literature, philosophy, history. Like, he was very well educated, but not in a sort of like showing off. It was really like came natural. It was part of the character.
I think it was a little showing off.
Yeah, of course. Come on. Yes, but sort of like not imposing. Like, you know, you should know. It's
he wasn't
like,
a jerk. No, he wasn't a jerk about it. But I mean, we both had beers at the grad student bar and met a lot of people who would be willing to throw Boethius quotes into sentences that they say. And
boy.
Would you say that Gypsy is the Raven's Hacienda?
Yeah, Gypsy was come on, Gypsy was our Hacienda.
That's so embarrassing for you guys.
Hey man, we had a lot of dance parties at Gypsy, and
that was Toad's Place was the Hacienda.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Toad's Place was Fac 1, and Gypsy was the Hacienda.
Gypsy was the Hacienda in the very beginning when it was totally empty, and there were like 20 people there.
No, for sure. That was yes.
It wasn't ecstasy Hacienda. It was it was like almost brink of failure Hacienda.
You know what the thing? Yes, that's true.
I would say to in favor of this place is that I don't know many of the listeners know, but anyway, the Gypsy was this graduate club. It became cool at one point when they restored the backyard and all the art students started to show up.
The art students were there. The art students are there. It's cool.
No, of course. We were always trying to like hook up with art students.
Okay.
We were always like, they're so cool.
All I know is I would go to the bar there and there'd be like a dude with his like Emerson book just like sitting there like a giant brick. And I'd be like, ugh.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was like most of the people were PhDs.
Toad Place had Besides the fact that I met my wife at Toad's Place, but also like there were great shows. I saw great bands there. So
we've talked about Toad's Place on this podcast because Mattia, you were with me, right, at of Montreal? Did you go see?
Yeah. Yes.
So we talked to Paul Keelan, who is a host of Cinematic Underdogs. Shout out to Paul. We talked to him about the film Almost Famous, which is about touring bands and stuff. And we were asking about all the bands he was in. He was in a band called, I think it was Bare Wires was the one that he did.
Was it the Palms one?
Yes, Painted Palms. Painted Palms opened for Of Montreal. Now, I didn't remember Painted Palms because I was there to see Of Montreal. But we ended up seeing Paul's band because he was in Painted Palms. And remember that the show that Of Montreal did with all the people dressed up?
Yeah.
He was one of those people. So
really?
This awesome. Strange kind of like, the wheel comes back around. Anyway, but
so many, really many bands from all. I saw I moved to New Haven August 2005, and at the time I was listening to the Decemberists and Dobbs. There was like a very popular English band at the time, and they both played in September. I was like, wow, I came to the coolest place on earth.
Yeah.
And I kind of changed my mind a little bit, but I still got to see I got to see two very cool shows.
I never changed my mind. I think New Haven is the coolest place on earth.
Wow.
New Haven is very comforting. It's part of I don't know if it's the nostalgia
Welcome to Fear
but I have very fun memories. And I think people is what made it special. So
totally, yeah. No, I mean we had a really special moment there. We had our own hacienda.
Oh my gosh.
But okay, all right. But unfortunately. There was no Tony Wilson. We did not have a Tony Wilson to channel
to bring us all
of that together. Yes, into a scene. One of the other aspects of this that I think is really funny is that Tony Wilson. We constantly are reminded that Tony Wilson has a day job.
Yes.
So he's busy doing all his concert promoting, but then he has to do these
because
TV
he didn't
segments.
make any money.
And he's got all these interstitial TV segments where he starts out with the hang gliding, but then one is like a duck that herds sheep.
I like the guy that cleans the channels. It's like that had no recollection whatsoever.
Yeah, what did you remember? And he said very little.
Very little. Well, the other part of that, he says, he starts out, Tony Wilson's introducing him. He says, this guy, whatever his name is, he's cleaned the channels in this century and the last. And then he's like, when did you start cleaning the channels? And the guy says, around 1900. He's like, well, almost, on the cusp. Oh, man.
I have with me a very special new friend of mine, Mr. Peter Duff, who worked on the canals not just in this century, but can you believe it, in the last one. Peter, the canals. How many years ago exactly? What year was it that you started working on the canals?
1900.
1900, yeah. Right. On the cusp of a new age.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about the canals in those days?
Very little.
Very little.
Yeah. Peaceful.
Peaceful.
Yes.
I don't think we're going to be able to use much of that. Do you want? I mean, the chap's barely standing.
There's a bunch of cameos also. Simon Pegg is in it as a journalist. Yeah, as one of the.
But this is before Simon. I mean, how big is Simon Pegg at this point?
Is he
He's
in
space, but he's not. No. Shaun of the Dead.
I think Shaun of the Dead wasn't come. I didn't come out yet. It was 2000. I should check exactly the time.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. He's in Spaced though, so this is a cameo for fans of BBC.
It's 2004, so yeah, not yet. And actually, the actress who plays, I forgot her name, who plays Steve Coogan's first wife, she was in Harry Potter.
She's Moaning Myrtle. She's my favorite. I love her. She's also the voice of Babu Frick, I found out when I looked it up on IMDb. Which rules. Yeah, because she does a lot of voice work, because I mean, obviously she sounds very different in Harry Potter as Moaning Myrtle than she does in this movie.
But you can still see she has this goofy kind of
my favorite quote
Muppet
of this whole
voice.
movie is not a Tony Wilson movie. It's a quote. It's her quote when she just says, "It's a bit grubby. I love the northern English accent. It's beautiful to listen to.
She looks like Sandy Shaw in this film, like the singer, which I loved.
Her costumes are phenomenal in this.
She's great.
She looks great.
The characterization of Tony Wilson in this is so meta because it's Steve Coogan simultaneously, taking a piss out of Tony Wilson, but then also making him, the probably more charismatic than the actual Tony Wilson. But do you have a favorite Tony Wilson quote from the movie, or just quote from the movie in general?
I have a bunch. I couldn't choose one, so I'll tell you my
Give us a
favorite
couple,
ones. Yes. Okay. One is called, I think you paraphrased it earlier, but it's like, the smaller the attendance, the bigger the history. There were 12 people at the Last Supper, half a dozen at Kitty Hawk. Archimedes was on his own in the back. And then one that it's kind of like reminds you of a line from Parks and Rec. It's like, jazz is the... Oh, sorry, I ask for forgiveness to the older jazz player, but jazz is the last refuge of the untalented. Jazz musicians enjoy themselves more than anyone listening to them does. It's weird.
He's not. Look, he's not wrong. The untalented thing is wrong, but the like they would enjoy themselves more than the fans. I mean, the fans. If you ever go to a jazz show or like a fusion prog rock show, the fans are enjoying it too. It's just that the musicians are enjoying it as much, if not maybe a little more than the fans, which is great.
There's a scene in Parks and Rec where. What's her name?
Leslie?
Like, Leslie. No, because like, just what is jazz? Just play the right notes. It's like, and that makes me think also of Fred Armisen. They did like an entire special for jokes for musicians. It's just the nerdiest thing ever, and it describes people going to. I think the case was like people going to blues concerts. They just walk in, they listen to two notes, like super happy. Then after 5 minutes, like. Try to sneak out because it's all the same. So,
oh man!
Anyway, so, yeah.
I mean, it's okay. Fine. Apologies to the jazz fans.
Sorry.
I'll give you a
go watch La La Land, you jazz fans.
Yeah, jazz fans, or Whiplash. Okay, so or any Damien Chazelle movie. Okay, I think my favorite part in the whole movie, which is like Laura knows that I'm about to enter into the Tone world, but so it's just the part where he's just showed up at the club, and they're gonna rent out this club on like Saturday nights or whatever from this guy Tony, and he's like, wait a second, hold on. He gathers his crew together, right? He gets his crew together and away from Tony, and he's like, we got a problem. There's only one problem. I think he says that there's only one problem.
Stinks in here. There's a problem. You never told me he's called Tony.
Who?
What's up?
Tony. There's two Tonys.
Yeah.
Well, that straight away. That's. Can you not see how that's a potential problem? You've got two people. He's in charge of the club. I'm supposed to be in charge of whatever it is we're doing. There's two Tonys on equal pegging. It's a confrontation. Who's Tony number one, who's Tony number two? There's going to have to be some sort of differentiation.
Yeah, but he's not called Tony, is he? He's called Tone. Don Tone. It's his fucking surname, Tone.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's a bit grubby.
Yeah, I know it's grubby, but we can get it cleaned up for the nights we're in.
That's worse.
What is worse, Tony?
Well, sorry to harp on about this, but that makes him Mr. Tony, and I'm just plain Tony.
Yeah, what's wrong with that, Tony?
Well, that's a hierarchy there straight away. Mr. Mr. Tony is more important than Tony. Hello, Mr. Tony. Yes, Mr. No, Mr. And just plain old Tony. Tony, me mate. Tony. I've got to have some sort of credibility.
Why don't you just call him Don? How about that? See if he goes for that. Call him Don.
Don.
Oh man, I love that.
I think my favorite quote or moment that is not a Wilson moment is the recording with Martin Hammett.
Yeah.
And Martin was like just really annoyed with that. I'm like, he's just like, why don't you just play your fucking instruments? Good. Why don't you? Like, he's like drinking like scotch from the bottle.
You wear it well. Now play like a musician.
Right. Yeah. You wear it really well. Exactly. Yeah. He's just like so annoyed and he's drinking. And I like that moment where he just like has a heavy sigh and he's like, I want to hear it on the roof.
Can I mention a personal anecdote? Like, so that guy, the bassist, Peter Hook, which actually as responsible for the sound of Joy Division as probably Ian Curtis, like those like very sort of like hypnotic bass lines. And they split the band. He was also in New Order. Now he hates everybody else and he shits on them. He also wrote a biography years ago. I remember one time I was coming from work and I decided to get off Coolidge Corner. At the time I was walking Austin, and then I stopped by Brooklyn Booksmith and I see giant poster saying Peter Hook former Joy Division presents his book, and I was like, is this him? And I crashed, and it was like I spent an hour with him, like it was presenting the book.
Cool.
And I was like,
Wow.
serendipitous. I was like, oh my god! I even skipped dinner so I could see him. It's like,
Did you get a signed copy?
No, but I think it said something. Hi, how are you? Something. But I was at least I was there. It was in the crowd.
You were there. That's awesome.
Peter Hook said about this movie that it was the biggest cunt in Manchester being played by the second biggest cunt. But he did the DVD commentary and he was there DJing at the Hacienda. So again, like this is how they all feel about Tony Wilson. Like you may not love him and you may think he's an ass, but like also he is the sun around everything.
Yeah, like
everything
Rob is like in one moment trying to beat the crap out of Tony Wilson, and then the next moment they're smoking a cigarette and it's all good. And then the next moment he's trying to kill him again. And Martin Hannett I don't know, is he shooting a blank at him? Tony Wilson has guns fired at him twice in this movie.
I think it just misses. That's the point.
Oh my god!
There's another fun quote about Martin Hannett. I wrote it down. It's like you can't threaten me, Martin. You're a big man, but you're out of shape. Although you could still sit on me. It's like
I like that one too.
Because he got super fat.
He got really fat.
He was 42 when he died like Martin, like of a heart attack. I mean, it's like,
terrible. I mean, my favorite is when they're at the funeral and he's like,
Death puts things in perspective. We're all equal in the grave. Except Martin, obviously, who's a huge character. So huge, his coffin wouldn't fit in his grave. I remember thinking, Martin Hannett, too big for death.
Strengthen the hope of resurrection in those whose bodies.
Anyway, it's like disrespectful, but he also hated.
Mean.
He hated that guy. They were like frenemies to the end, you know. The other one that I really like is when he's doing Wheel of Fortune, which apparently is not true.
He did not actually host Wheel of Fortune. He hosted other game shows, but probably, you know.
So they do Wheel of Fortune so he can throw in his Boethius quote.
Yep.
And he goes in there, he's like, welcome to Wheel of Fortune. It's the wheel, blah, blah, blah. He does the whole thing. And then they cut to the producer who is actually the actual Tony Wilson.
Yep.
Right? And he's like, what? Just cut from Welcome to Wheel of Fortune to them spinning the wheel. I just think about that because I edit this podcast and there's a lot of times where I'm just like saying stuff and I'm just in my mind thinking, yeah, just cut from the question to the person responding. And you have all this 30-second in between, just cut all that out.
Sorry, I had like a really, my mind also just went to Tony Wilson and this like the joy of him sort of like getting to like edit his own, as you edit yourself to make yourself sound better in this podcast, Justin, and you edit me to make me sound better. So thank you for that.
Everyone gets a good edit.
Yeah, you know, obviously Wilson's not like editing in this movie, but like there's fun fact, he wrote a novelization of this movie afterwards. Yes. So
which is funny. It's like, you know, when you buy the book of like I don't know, one time I saw the novelization of Aliens. Like,
I would want to novelization of Tenet is the one I want to get a novelization of.
When I was in the 6th grade, I got a novelization of the Sixth Sense movie because I was too scared to watch it, but I wanted to like know what was up, so I read the novelization.
We should do that. Should be the one we do for 100th. Sixth Sense. All right, maybe not. All right. Well, this is coming out after the 100th, so we will have decided.
One random thing. Which is we want to talk about Michael Winterbottom. So and I must confess I was not super familiar with his entire like filmography because it's too vast, too large. Like for example, like except for the movies he presented in the 90s to Cannes, like Welcome to Sarajevo, Wonderland, but all the series, The Trip, Trip to Italy, Trip to Greece with Steve Coogan and what's the other guy, Rob Brydon. That I'm not necessarily a big fan. That's entertaining, but it was also I didn't realize he was the director of a film that I'd watched, and it's also a musical film. It's called 9 Songs. Are you familiar with that?
No,
film?
I have not seen it. Tell us about it.
It's an erotic film, pretty much. And then it was recommended me the same person who told me to watch 24 Hour Party People because I love that music. So it's about the music scene in 2004. So it's a story of this British researcher. He works is a climatologist, works in Ontario, who meets an American exchange student in London. They needed a concert, and all the film is like 9 songs played, like so 9 concerts they attend, and 9 sex scenes, pretty much. So it's like concert, sex, and it's one of the most explicit like films ever presented at Cannes, which is incredible. Very scandalous, but it's also like a pretty good love story in general. I didn't like it was directed by Winterbottom, so I wanted to look more into that. And it's funny because yes, this sort of like pretense of pretty much like for people of cinema verite, sort of like, oh wow, this is everything is real, the sex is unsimulated. Truth is, I was reading like interviews with the actors, like Michael Winterbottom was choreographing the whole thing. It's like even every single movement in the sexual act is heavily choreographed, which is really interesting. In a sense, there are parallels with 24 Hour Party People, given this pretense of like reality where it's actually heavily manipulated.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. So I had not seen that film. For me, that connection point was with The Trip. So, because I mean, that's the one that most people will have seen of Michael Winterbottom. And that's the case where you have, I think, something which looks like it's effectively a documentary. They're playing themselves. And they're really going to these restaurants and eating and so on. But I'm sure, much like what you're saying, it's improv comedy, but it is filmed and it's written and there's an arc and everything and they planned it out. But I like that idea of the thing that's presented as real, but it's really fake. Like there's something kind of intriguing about that. The Iranians, I think, are the masters of that, but like in world cinema. But like I feel like Winterbottom is like he's like the English equivalent of that. And I do really, I know like Laura and I are going to sit here and disagree about The Trip. It's fine. We don't have to get into it.
No, I
like The
intrigued.
Trips.
I like that element of The Trip. Do they need to go on 400 trips? And do I need to hear Man in a Box again? Because I don't ever
Man in a Box is great. They're all
or like them just doing Michael Caine for the 800th time.
Okay, well that stuff is great.
It's repetitive.
The other one I want to shout out is The Look of Love. I think this doesn't get very much love at all. When I look on my Letterboxd, only 2 people have seen it. Whereas
only the poot heads have seen it.
I have seen it, and I think it's pretty funny. I mean, Look of Love is about Paul Raymond, who's basically the British Hugh Hefner. He's like builds a porn empire. It's good. Come on, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
You recommend it?
I think it's fun. Streaming now on Canopy.
Oh, nice. Let me see if
Listen, Winterbottom and Coogan have formed from this movie on. I think this is the first one that they did together. A beautiful partnership. And I'm happy for them. I just find it really grating.
I'm just really watching now the playlist of that film. I told you 9 songs, and the 9 songs are really part of that scene that we mentioned earlier, like the music scene when music started to sound like something else.
Tell us what are they?
New. So, and it's funny that he had a movie about when music looked at the future, and then when music. Probably we didn't know at the time. Probably in 2004, we still didn't know that. The Wheel of Fortune, sort of
everybody's going to become spinning. A line.
Yeah,
it's going to become a line. What were some of the songs?
Become a lie.
Oh, I see. So it's Dandy Warhol's Black Rebel,
Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, the Von Bonins. They're like Primal Scream, Super Furry Animals, Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah,
Franz Ferdinand. Forgot about that one.
We're playing in my hometown this summer on the Greatest Hits show.
I know we're old now, man. We're old.
I was like, oh my gosh, was that so awesome? And it was like 20 years ago. Like,
these are reunion tours now. They are all old.
Yeah, most of the concerts I go recently, it's mostly reunions or like, I feel old. I felt old when Jimmy Ward played at Spring Fling in 2011. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I was like, oh gosh, why am I the only one enjoying this?
No, I think the crowd was into Jimmy. They just wanted to hear the hits. That's the thing, is that Spring Fling is a very difficult venue for bands because, bands come in and they want to play their new stuff or whatever, and they were, hired basically to just play those.
Do you have the equivalent of Spring Fling at MIT?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah.
Because at Boston College you have Modstock.
What's that?
Because it's like the Spring Fling. It's in the spring, towards the end of the semester, they have a concert and they have a party. It's called Modstock because there's an area where the senior live on campus. It's all like houses built in the 70s called modular houses,
mods.
aka the mods.
Yes.
It's party central. Senior lives there. That's a party, and they do like Modstock. That was something kind of like fun, and they do concerts. And every year I ask my students who's playing, and they come up. They're very excited about some band, and I don't know them, and I'm like, I feel so bad.
Yeah, you're old now, Mattia.
I'm very old. I'm 24. I was 24 this summer, so
Yeah, you're moving backwards. I mean, yeah, I think
by a couple of
the
decades.
thing that we have not succeeded in is creating a musical movement that will outlive us. And I think that's there's still time, right? There's still
You mean
time.
us personally?
Yeah, we're old and we want to be remembered in posterity, and so we need to do our own Tony Wilson thing. So, just get on it, Laura.
I made a child.
Laura,
I did my posterity
that's true,
thing.
actually.
Yeah, it's a child, it's important.
Laura's like, wait, has anyone discovered Taylor Swift? Because I got someone for you. Mattia,
I haven't listened to new artists
Jack
in
Kenton,
a decade.
Yeah, all we listen to now is children's music. And that and Weird Al. Our child is really into Weird Al in the last 24 hours. So
We have Theo, our son, as a top 4. He likes Lizzo, Harry Styles,
Yep.
Unknown Mortal Orchestra, and Phoenix. So we are.
Hey,
It's okay.
okay.
you snuck Phoenix in there.
Nice. No, Phoenix is bouncy. That would be good. I should play Ethan some Phoenix.
Yeah.
Is there anything cuter than a 3-year-old being saying, "Blame it on my juice, blame it on my
No.
juice"?
So we listen to Lizzo, and we are afraid that he might repeat the actual words. So,
Yeah.
sometimes,
I sometimes just yell louder over Lizzo when she. But there's a lot of bitch in those
and
songs.
it's like, oh, beach. Oh, yeah. She likes to go to the beach. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like,
Hey, let's go to the
bitch.
beach. Yeah, stuff like that.
She's always calling people beach. What is that all
I
about?
know.
But so he said, there's no Tony was about doing it, and I told Wilson with this kind of way of delivering music, you can self promote.
That's
The problem
true.
is having the visibility or the.
That's the thing is you have to cut through the noise. Everyone is self promoting.
The problem is that there's too much. How can you, even if you have maybe out there there's some. I was about to say some MySpace profile. Gosh, I'm old.
It's TikTok, Mattia. It's TikTok.
Some TikTok artists that
or podcast.
But even, for example, also the way you listen to music. TikTok, there are short videos, and so your music has to be catchy right away if you want to sort of pierce through the fog, to cut through the noise.
Right.
And so it's difficult. Probably the way we conceive of the idea of a song might become or be outdated. Think about how we listen to music. Every year you have the earworm that accompanies the gazillion of TikTok videos. This year was Makeba. Remember, it was in every other TikTok video. It was and there's just a clip. The song is 3 minutes, but you only have that 10 seconds. So how can you use TikTok to promote music? You have to capture attention and trend them in. I see many bands using Instagram to sort of generate attention, but they do it sideways. So there's a band called October Drift that do kind of shoegaze, and they promote guitar pedals or gear, so they get you in through that, or the band with a funny singer doing memes, and then you watch the memes and then you listen to the music. So I think that the fruition and content just changing completely. I don't think I would be able to do that. I don't know.
Oh, don't say that. I mean, you would be if you were 24 now, Mattia. Which you are 24.
He is 24.
Yeah, okay, never mind.
As
You
previously
would be
established.
fine. Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's the thing is we're old, and with the tech, we're now experiencing what our parents or grandparents experienced when they encountered the internet, and they were like, "What is this thing?" And don't go on there and chat with people. Remember when we all got that talking to? And now look at what we're doing. We're chatting with strangers on the internet. But I do think that it is that we're just I don't know how to, I don't know how to cultivate the kind of personality that would be TikTok appropriate. I just have no idea. I can watch those videos and sort of broadly understand why they're popular, but I have literally no idea how to engage with that. And
there are agencies that sort of nurture that kind of talent. If you notice, many influencers, you notice managed by. If you go dig and there.
You spent some time on TikTok, Mattia.
No, I mean I don't have TikTok. I like most old people that have 24 plus other years.
Yes, yes.
I watched it. I watched TikTok videos 2 weeks later on Instagram.
Yes, okay,
whatever was popular 2 weeks ago, I watched it on Instagram now.
Yeah,
so,
but I think the older person thing would be to watch the TikTok digest on YouTube.
Oh.
Right.
But it's so funny that I honestly I go down deep holes of of both YouTube and Instagram. I watch videos, clips, which is terrible. It's terrible for my ADHD. And I don't even I like Instagram because there was no I didn't have to read any caption. I just like photographs.
Yeah.
And I like, even now I appreciate, but now like the algorithm favors videos. So I end up myself like doom scrolling.
There's a lot of videos on. Yeah, it is true. Well, Mattia, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking 24-hour party people. We'll hope to have you back at some point again. And maybe we could even do like an Italian, Yale Italian Studies Department reunion here and just get you and Griffin and Chris Kaiser. And Toby. We've had
3 out of 4 of
I know
those.
3 out of 4 of the crew.
Griffin,
and
we're talking
we just
to you.
do not have Griffin yet. But
I saw Griffin in New York, and I told him you should go on.
Okay,
I'm promoting
Thank you,
guys.
Mattia.
Yes, good.
That you try to go there.
But thank you for being here, Mattia. And you don't have any social media to promote. You don't care, right? I don't know.
No, I have my personal Instagram, which is private, so no, I don't. So
don't follow Mattia on Instagram, but
You can't find him.
Do follow us. We are at CowsPod on Twitter. You can find us on the web at cowspod.wordpress.com.
I would promote you though.
Thank you, Mattia.
Yeah, can you send out some of those circa 2008 photos of Justin?
Yeah, send some of those. No, we'll put them on the site for the people. Send me a couple of them and we'll put them up. In 2 weeks, we are going to be talking to Chad Perman, editor-in-chief of Brightwell Dark Room, about Joe versus the Volcano. So that should be fun. A film I have not yet seen, but I'm very excited because Chad is very excited to talk about it.
We're having a Thanksgiving.
Yep, Thanksgiving. All right, talk to you guys soon. Bye.
How does it feel to treat me like you do?